Hello, Claudia. Welcome to All Over Again podcast.
It is so good to see you, my friend.
It is so good to see you. It's not enough. It's not enough. I need you back on the East Coast to be able to see you more.
Yeah, it's definitely, in many ways, though, with COVID, right? I mean, we were all physically separated, and in
Yes.
a way, it sort of has forced us to stay in touch through spirit and energy and digital formats. And I'm really proud of us. I'm proud of us that we've stayed so close through all the phases and seasons of life.
Of everything. And we've known each other for quite some time. I was actually thinking about that. We've known each other since I first saw you at the S.H.E Summit. So I knew of you before you knew of me. I was at Audi and I remember I had this aha moment. I was going through fertility challenges and all these different things in a corporate space. I felt very alone. I remember thinking I had to show up this one way in my corporate environment, and then I had to show up a different way socially and personally, right? And then in my own skin, I was falling apart. So I remember some words that you shared, which I was going to ask you about this, so I might as well jump in now. But I remember you shared that things happen for you, not to you. And I think that was that pivotal moment where I thought, okay, so what can I do to make this really tough sort of mogul mountain feel a little bit easier to climb? And that's sort of when I started thinking like, oh, okay, I'm going to start building a community because I can't be the only one out there that's having, these struggles with, women's health and fertility. And so that's when it all began. I started a blog. I reached out to you and I said, Claudia, can I talk to you?
Yes.
And you said yes. And then I was just so taken by how amazing you are that I remember we met and I said, I want to get Audi involved with sponsoring the S.H.E Summit. And the rest is sort of history, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing how when you live this life, this precious life that we have, how there are moments and a quote or a phrase or a person that can come into your life and the impact, right? That one phrase can make such a deep shift in a person's life. And that is why that's really at the underlying passion and soul of my work, and why I'm so passionate about what I do is the power of humanity and people, and that we all live this external world of like, here, this is my name, this is my title, this is what I do for a living, this is where I live, and I have a child or I don't, and these external definitions, but internally there's a whole other world that people are living through and experiencing. And how do I create support for individuals that will help them unlock what is inside?
Exactly. And the both of us have been together through various iterations. I mean, I hopped on the Claudia Chan wagon a little bit later, right? I wasn't there during your S.H.E days, but I did kind of see this evolution between the S.H.E Summit, S.H.E Global, and now Inner Circle, which I want to talk all about. I have
Yes,
so much to talk to you about.
we
But
have so much
first,
to talk about.
before we dive into that, I would love for our listeners to learn more about you because I know a fair amount about you because you are such an open book, and I so appreciate that about you. How would you describe yourself to the world in 3 adjectives?
Which is probably, by the way, one of the hardest things to do. Is at 48 years old, all the things that you've created and done. And I think why wholeness too, right, is so much at that word is so rooted at in my current work. God, 3 adjectives were just words: humanity, spirit, wholeness. But I can
Perfect.
share my story though. I can share my story if that's helpful.
I would love to, because one of the things I do want to touch on was how being the daughter, the child of Chinese immigrants has really shaped who you are in so many ways, because we've talked about that. So tell the
Yeah,
story, but
sure.
please keep that as part of your story if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in New York City and had that typical, New York experience growing up. And my parents are Chinese immigrants, like first generation. And so my brother and I were born, here in the States. And, somehow over, and I'll come back to the sort of Chinese family of origin and all of that. But essentially, I was always very social and I was really always good with people and understanding people. And, somehow I had gone to an all girls school, high school, all girls, what's called Hewitt on the Upper East Side. And then I went to Smith College in Massachusetts. So I had this like Northeast upbringing, and I ended up being really pulled into the women's space, the women's content and media platform space for really over 20 years as an entrepreneur. So I'm celebrating 24 years of entrepreneurship today at 48. So I started when I was 24, so exactly like halfway through my life. And yeah, I've really had this consistent theme of creating platforms that drive community and connection, and really predominantly in the women's space. And the first 10 years, I would say from like 25 to 35 years old, it was the era of the 2000s. Sex in the City was really big. Devil Wears Prada, Confessions of a Shopaholic, Charlie's Angels. I mean, everything. And as a Gen Xer in my 20s and 30s, it was all, about the value of women was so placed on, the brands that we wore and the restaurants we ate at. Like if you made it to the big city, it's, the coolest, latest emerging designers. And looking back at culture, I'm like, okay, that 10 years was, I call it the fluff era, for women, and very women's lifestyle oriented. And so, the dream that women had was, the Carrie Bradshaw dream, like move to New York, have a cool job, marry like a rich guy, and basically like eat at fabulous and have fabulous things. And so, and it's so amazing, and like really became also just obsessed with culture and thinking about how much culture and generation and time shapes who we are and who we become. And so that, by the time I was 29 years old, it was already a multi-million-dollar company. We launched right after September 11th, 2001. And so it just really was the right place at the right time. And we worked with, over hundreds of brands that would sponsor our girls' night out events. There were these girls' night out shopping parties. And, it was like an $8 million business by the time I was like in my early 30s. I ran it from 25 to 35 years old. And then from there, eventually I met my husband, now husband, John, who was this boy from Georgia. And he went to Auburn University, which is like the SEC, like football. Like I knew nothing about the Southern world. And like, I just knew nothing about the South, really. And so he took me to church, Trinity Church on the Upper East Side of New York City. And that's really where I felt like I had reach this material success. Like I was going on TV all the time. I was an expert. I was a multi-million-dollar like female entrepreneur. I was advising, like doing mentorship lunches with the founders of Rent the Runway, Birchbox, like all of them, right? And so who are now like, so huge, but they were babies when I met them. And so, and but I felt like I lacked purpose. And I also increasingly had a toxic business partnership with my business partner at the time. But I was really just, all of my identity and sense of success was so tied to earning and hitting numbers and being a big deal and building this huge platform. Like so much of what the materialistic and superficial definitions of success. But my character, behind the red carpet, like behind the screen, my character, I really was very underdeveloped as a leader, as a person of character, because I was a baby. I grew up running this business, and I knew how to hustle, and I knew how to like monetize and grow a company, but I really hadn't developed personal development and leadership skills. And when I went to church, that's really when I realized I was just living my life in the world versus leading my life for the world. And that was really my major shift that took me into creating an empowerment, like moving from a lifestyle entertainment company to a leadership and empowerment company, where then I would devote the next 10 years to serving.
So before we jump into my next set of questions, I'd love to know from you, how did growing up as a first generation American impact who you are today?
You know, in so many ways, and my therapy has taught me this powerful term called the family of origin. And I think as we think about 8 billion people on the planet and the work that I do in personal growth, coaching, therapy, leadership work, is that every human being, we're born into a family of origin, where the culture, like I'm Chinese American. I know you are part French, what was the other one?
Polish.
Polish,
First
right?
generation too.
That's right. And so, like how our parents grew up, the messaging, the conditioning, the indoctrination, right? It's like they grow up with a story. They grow up with their values and how they want to protect us or how they want to love us. And so we really are grown up in this messaging. And so, but again, and they all just know, our parents knew how to do the best they could in their generation. And it's, we all just sort of try to do the best that we can. And so, I think my immigrant story will relate to many others in the sense that my parents were born in China, and right before when Mao took over China, and it became anti-intellectualism and it became a very communist socialist place. And so they fled to Taiwan, but they were born into aristocracy, but they lost everything. And so when they came to America, my dad came over in the 60s, my mom came over in the 70s, and I was born in 1975. It was very much around survival. Survival. We are Chinese. We have broken English. We don't have college educations, but we got here. And how do you make the best of being in America? And my dad, his whole goal was just to study and go back. But he basically ended up bartending on Wall Street, had a bunch of buddies that eventually invested in his first Chinese restaurant, S.H.E. And really, my dad was sort of the godfather of Chinese restaurants, like the American version of Chinese restaurants. And a lot of the, like David Kay and like a lot of the famous Chinese restaurateurs, like used to wait for my dad, like growing up in the 60s and 70s. And so what happened was unconsciously, they were like, you need to go to the best schools. We're going to not spend money on a 25-cent newspaper, to like save money for you to go to private school, because we want to put you where the affluence is. We want to put you where, on Park Avenue, and go to the private school, because you will become the company you keep and you will become like them. And so, but what I realized is, and they had like from an attachment, because like there's insecure attachment, security attachment, they loved me so much, which is why, and I think you and I are similar in this way, why we're so confident with who we are, and we're social, and I had so much love growing up, but there was a lot of unconscious fear instilled into me, which was, everything was very much about money, but really it was really about safety. Like, well, how much does that cost? And how much are you going to make doing that? And I think you need to look better and prettier, and you need to have a nose job, because so that you can, in China, you have to have these amazing noses, right? To like, a nose represents a lot, in Chinese culture. And so we need you to marry this type of person, and a doctor or a hedge fund guy or a lawyer. And so it was very much, I was brought up with this confidence to create and be an entrepreneur, but it was also very much with this impending fear that like the doom was on the other side. And it's really interesting, because they loved me and my brother so much. And I think when you're really seen and loved, you grow up with this confidence. And so I was always, that confidence gave me the energy and the assertiveness to go out and create and build these impossible platforms. But at the same time, I had this unconscious impending fear that doom was on the other side if I didn't earn this amount, or I didn't hit, like buy the real estate and add these titles to my name and just exit companies. And it's so interesting too, because I think that for so many of us, who were brought up, like if you're in your, like if you're an older millennial, if you're a Gen Xer, you're brought up in a time where our parents grew up in a time where there was famine and there was war and there was colonization and there was, just so much trauma that our generations were brought up in so much scarcity and survival instinct. And so, in a way, I feel it sends you on this journey of, I gotta have more. I gotta achievement, more. And and then culture also tells you that, right? But in many ways, it's very unclear what what is actually enough. Like, what is actually complete? And so you end up, and that's a lot of my work today is like, is people are striving for this external identity and like chronic, when this happens, then I will be XYZ. And yet it's really more about, how do I arrive into, what my definition of wholeness means, which is safety and joy and creativity and passion and purpose and all these things, and peace. And so that I can actually, because that's really ultimately what we want to experience.
Of course, because so much of what we have experienced, right, and what we were brought up around was truly meant from the best place in our parents' heart, but also through the lens of their trauma. And so generational trauma feels very real. And as you are sharing your story, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can relate to this. I can relate to that, right? And it's true. There's a lot of trauma, having parents. My parents grew up separately in different places in the world where there was war, right? My mother grew up, they left Paris and they were in North Africa, in Algeria, and there was the Franco-Algerian War, right? So my mom has that as a core memory. And then my father grew up in Poland, where he was born during World War II. And as you can imagine, he had his own generational trauma to deal with as a result of living through that as a very young child, but also having a mother who was deeply impacted by the war. So it's true. It's like, it's fascinating. So when you think about your experiences and all that you've learned, right, about yourself, so by understanding your family of origin, do you feel like now, knowing what you know now and having done so much work to be able to then share this work with others, is there anything that you've had to unlearn that was critical?
Yeah, and what happened was, absolutely. I spent then, after really becoming a person of faith, I had the vision to create S.H.E Global. And it was for the last 10 years. So whereas the first 10 years, again, was more like women's lifestyle and entertainment, the last 10 years was women's leadership and empowerment. And so I also started looking at gender and women and the status of women and girls in the world, and how the lack of equity and equality, and obviously that was my experience. Like, God put me in this community of women, and women are always also the first to, be driven by cause and do something philanthropic or social issue driven. And the work that I'm in now for the next 10 years, and I can, I'll share more about, I obviously created the S.H.E Summit conference, which has had so much impact. I mean, I think it's over 1 million people that I've impacted through the S.H.E Summit conference, through the 700 thought leaders that have been on my stage, that I've advised, to the book, This Is How We Rise, and just being a keynote speaker and coach for so long. But really now, the next 10 years, I say, is really devoted to helping people get whole, and really doing this coaching work to help them heal from and get to a place faster than it took me. And so what I'll say is, I'll say this phrase to sort of give this conversation an umbrella, which is ultimately, I guess this would be the flagship statement that I share with my community, which is that the goal in life is not to, achieve this imaginary ideal, this, like, when this happens, then I will da 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 da, or like, yeah, I gotta like work for that raise, and I gotta like build a business and I got to I got to have the baby. It's like just this endless, limitless ideal, which really, again, constantly puts us in a posture of striving. And it's not really clear, again, like what exactly is enough, right? Like, so the goal in life is not to achieve this imaginary ideal that's really sort of unclear, but instead to define and discover what wholeness means to you. And really what that means is that if you are at the end of your life and, they're going to pull the plug soon, or, you're imagining your funeral, right? It's really like looking back at your 80 years, your 90 years, or 70 years, or 100 years that you've lived. It's what story do you want to tell? Like, what did you experience? What did you express? Did you live full out? Did you fully express who you were on this planet to be and experience and receive and give, right? It's really more about what did I experience versus what did I achieve? And so, because again, the reason why people want to achieve more money and achieve that is for safety, for peace, for creativity, for joy, for these emotions and feelings, right? So wholeness really is how the goal in life is really to define what does wholeness mean to you? What does a complete, full life, fullest expression of your life mean to you that you experience, the story you want to tell, what really mattered the most. And then to make a decision, whether you're 25, 35, 45, 65, 75 today, to like step into this new paradigm of your life and to fully experience, express, and become that authenticity.
And so knowing all of this now, right? Because you know all of these things. Did the root definition that was seated in all of our minds of achievement come from traditional trauma that was passed on? Yes. Or is that where it comes from? Because I feel that too, that achievement.
Right. So basically what you and I pretty much believe every single human ultimately want to feel is worthiness. Like, am I enough? Like, am I worthy? Am I talented? Am I good at what I do? Am I doing what I should be doing? Right. You want to have that feeling of worthiness. You want to be seen. Like, you want to know that you matter. We want to feel peace. We don't want to feel like constantly triggered throughout the day and our nervous system is at havoc. We want to feel safe. We want to feel safe. Like, the reason why we've always gotten along so well over these years is because we feel that we are psychologically safe space for each other. We can be vulnerable and not be judged, which is so much of what you do with your communities and your Fertilist platform. We want to feel that we're doing our passion, we want to be creative. Like, we have all been blessed with talents and gifts and just things that we're really good at that we love to do. We want to have a life where we do those things. Like you said to me, Claudia, like, I really want to just do what I love and have time for my family and enjoy my life that I'm blessed to have, right? It's so simple what human beings want. Like, that really is what everybody universally want. But yes, when clients come to me and they're like, hey, I want to like launch my business and monetize it. I have a multi-million-dollar company, but I'm burnt out and I need to like simplify. Or, hey, I've had this career and I'm ready to like retire or start my own consultancy and like build my own thought leadership. Hey, like, I just got through a divorce. I just had a loss. I'm going through a major life change. At the end of the day, the identity shift, the thing you want to create, everything you want to do, at the end of the day, why do we want to do all those things? To ultimately, we all universally want the feelings and the emotional health of peace, safety, creativity. And when we're in that, that's when we're in our power. And so my work now, like, people come to me and they say, hey, I want to grow this. Because I've created everything I've ever created and created multi-millions in value and impacted over 1 million. And I can help you do that. But all the internal coaching and advisory work is really the same. It's really rooted in this 4-part framework that I created called whole self-based coaching. And so the thing is that, like, even where you are in your life, this next chapter, this all over again, it's really, it's because you're getting into alignment, right? You've been healing from trauma and you're getting into alignment with your with really what you define as wholeness and completeness. So
And I
life is almost
appreciate that.
a journey. I was just saying, you and I were talking about the all over again. And I think, and I have this also, this reframe on our life at 48, and how so many of my clients feel like, oh my God, like time is running out. Like I've wasted my life, or like they're so either they're like, they shoulds themselves, which is, I always say, is rooted in shame and depression. Like I should have, like they beat themselves up, or it's rooted in the future, which is anxiety driven, which is the what ifs. But what if this happens, and it's more fear based. So you're either like beating yourself up, or you're basically in fear. And so, but what I say is like, the big reframe is like, what if your best years are ahead of you, and you're actually starting the second half of your life, or the next chapter of your life, as the best version of yourself. And really, all over again to me means like you've had all these chapters and phases of the self, and every phase has built onto the other. So you are technically the most, like at 48, I'm definitely the most whole version of me. I'm the most healed version of me. I know there's tons of more healing to do, but it's a whole different reframe, that nothing is wasted and you're really just building on. But the choice is like, can you make a choice today to step into a future, to create a new future that is going to be the best future ahead, the best version of your life ahead, and continue to invest in yourself to get there?
100%. And I also, as you were speaking, I think there's no shame in having gone through the should haves, because the should haves to me, as you're sharing that, are so rooted in bargaining, right? Like, and you think about the bargaining when you're dealing with, grief or loss, or any sort of hard moment in your life that you can't take back, right? To try to do over. Hence the premise of the show. Would you do it all over again, knowing what you know now? But I think of that we have this sort of cultural obsession with, positive
Perfectionism.
toxicity. Yeah, of toxic positivity too, right? Like everything's always going to be perfect, but I think we have to go through these valleys of the bargaining and such. It's not a bad thing, but I think societally we have this idea that you're not supposed to have regrets. You're supposed to, keep looking forward. And I think that if we don't give ourselves the space to have those moments for those valleys, then it's hard to move forward, because we're always second guessing ourselves in the back of our minds, or at least I was. And why do I feel this way? There's so much shame, and that's such a heavy, right? So to me, feeling all of the feels and being allowed to, being mad. Like I didn't know that I was allowed to feel mad, right? I was brought up to be, this certain way so that I would present well, so that I would be accepted. And that was, that I would get into this
It was
school.
a career. Yes.
Right. I would get this job, and I didn't understand those things until later. And that was like the great unlearn for me. And listen, there are so many great unlearnings that are still taking place, right? But it's
Forever and ever.
it's amazing. I feel really good that I can embrace the hard moments, and it's kind of amazing that we can be free from that we can, we have the liberty to feel all the feels. Like it's okay. So I want to get back to you, Claudia, knowing what you know now, what would you do all over again, and why?
I think it builds on what you were just saying perfectly, which is I would have been much kinder to myself in those moments of struggle, in those mental health seasons where you are beating yourself up, or you are in anxiety, whether it's about the past or the future. And so, really building on what you just said, which is, that I believe if you take two different people, and you take somebody who just never went through trauma, or like never went through like real hardship, and then you take somebody who did, and you really compare like the character and the knowledge and the wisdom of two people, right? It truly is the obstacles and those seasons of trial those really, really hard suffering moments where, it's so dark internally, that really were the life changers. They were the biggest change makers in your life, because that's how you developed resilience. That's how you actually became self-aware and learned more about yourself, learned more about, what you want to unlearn and let go of. Okay, this like scarcity and survival was a security tool that my parents gave me. I'm going to let that go. you know and what do I want to unlearn, and what do I want to build, right? And so it is the hardest moments of life. I would have actually, I wish I could have gone back and know those moments, and just regulated myself faster to say, this is like, I'm grateful for this. I'm not going to resist this emotion right now. I'm going to fully feel it, and I'm going to give my body what I need. I'm going to take the day off. I'm going to rest. I'm going to get into prayer. I'm going to you know, go to a yoga class. Like, I'm going to call my therapist, call my best friend. I'm going to have self-compassion and love, and really see this as a gift, see this hardship in this moment as a gift. I think that that's really what, because there's no experience, or there's no person, or no that I would ever redo again. But it's those moments, those million moments where you're triggered and you're really hard on yourself, and you're in a vortex and you can't get out of it. I would have had, it's a skill that I work on today, is being a lot more self-compassionate and loving, and knowing that this was a gift in the moment. It was a blessing.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And you've also shared that finding God allowed you to, was it lead through life?
Yeah, it's a shift of, I think that we're brought up into our lives, and like, it's about you. Like, unless cause and like philanthropy and giving was a part of, like, again, the messaging to you, I didn't have that growing up, because we were an immigrant family, Chinese, and it was like survive. Like, so for me, I think my first part of my life was, I say, a me over we mindset. And then once I became a person of faith, I realized, wow, like, I'm a part of this bigger humanity, and I shifted to this me for we. And like what I say, live my life in the world to lead my life for the world. That yes, the journey of life, and whether you see it at 20, 30, 40, however, whatever age you see it at, is like, yes, I need to like get a job and go to school and get a raise and make money and get, gain. But at a certain point, it's so that I can contribute. It's so that I can give. At a certain point, it's about giving your life away, and so that it was about, I need to live a life of community and connection. Like, nothing matters more than in the world than people, which is what the Bible and what God, what faith teaches you. Like love your brothers and your sisters more than you love yourself. Like, we're here to actually serve and contribute and leave this earth, this short earthly life, in a better place than you found it. And it is like, how do you leave a dent in the universe before you go? And so it was very much this massive shift for me, which was, again, like, we're Chinese, and, we're starting from nothing, survive, and, keep it all your, like, save, hoard, versus, like, stepping into so you can give and contribute.
And one of the things that I shared earlier was that you really opened my eyes that things happen for you, not to you. What was your moment when you realized that something was happening for you rather than to you?
It really was that first 10 years when I was doing running S.H.E.'s Girls Night Out with my partner. And it was more and more of a difficult, just a whole season of, identity change. And I think that's what happens too when we're leaving a job, or we have a breakup, or you just feel like you're struggling, in some part of your work and life, and mental health, and, fertility, right? It's like something that you really want, that you feel like you've been striving for, is not showing up. I was actually at church, and I think a pastor, or it's in the Bible, or like, that's when I first heard it. It's everything is happening for you. And that's when I realized, how do we turn our pain into our positive impact? How do we turn our pain into our purpose? How do we turn our pain into our passion? And I think that when you do suffer in something, the biggest regulator to calm you and to nourish you is to actually help others with that. And I think human beings have a healthy human being has a natural tendency and desire to connect. Like, human beings are wired to connect and support each other. And, it's like all the stuff right now on diversity, inclusion, and all the how divided we are as a nation and as a world, and how the power we give to these words, and how headlines trigger everybody. Like, at the end of the day, we all are connected through humanity. Like, I think human might be like my favorite word in the world, but yeah, so God really, and God to this day, my relationship with God is like when they say like, hey, I've always created and seen things before others see them, like in terms of the next movements. It's really my spiritual work is my superpower.
That's the most beautiful segue, because that's where I was going next. I have seen this in you, that you've talked about turning pain into purpose. You've talked about the diversity and equity and inclusion movement and all of these other very pivotal cultural moments before they actually took place on a broader scale.
Yeah.
So that's what's so fascinating to me, is that you've always sensed these topics, these changes, so to speak, and spoken vulnerably as well at times before they're even more before they are even more widely spoken about. So, you've talked about how it's okay to feel, how turning, your pain into purpose and creating that new sort of company, becoming an entrepreneur might be your path. You've talked about being an entrepreneur. You've talked about, all of the different ways of preneurship, so to speak. And everybody's moment can be linked to that change. I mean, you've even shared about your experience with loss. And where I'm going with all of this is that you've always been ahead of the curve. And I think, in my view, it's because you've shared so openly. I mean, you spoke about loss and miscarriage years before public figures were talking about their experiences out loud with fertility related loss and miscarriage and so what gave you the confidence to be able to not only realize these things but share and speak them out loud?
I think that I think there's a few, like, why God pulled me into this work is I was definitely born to be, again, somebody that connects with people deeply and quickly. Like, it's almost like clairvoyant, and so I can get to know you internally, holistically, as fast as possible, so that I can help you, pull you, cast vision on you for something, for really ultimately what you desire, the desired outcome you really want. And so I think that there's like the people part of me, and I think plus the faith part, because faith, like, I've experienced the miscarriage, I've experienced loss, I've experienced so much. I mean, granted, there's so much I have not experienced, but based on the wholeness and topics that I've experienced, I think that I'm just maybe a first mover. And because of my spiritual faith, I do the work, I do the inner work. And so maybe that's why I'm a first mover on predicting what's coming next. And so when I'm telling you what's coming next, so if we just look at women in culture, right? Like, the 2000s was, fluff and like beauty and this external perfectionism, right? The last 10 years has been about, like, social movements, gender equity, and an impact. And it's been about, empowerment, but all the success, like all the barriers that women have broken, like whether it's more women in the C-suite, more women entrepreneurs, more women hitting revenue numbers, or it's been built on burnout, right? Because because we never took anything off of women's plates. So they grew up in if you're a Gen Xer or you're a millennial, you're in a generation where you had the traditional norms of being like, a wife, a mother, a caregiver, all these things. You got to look good and you got to be in shape and you got to like have all these things. But at the same time, you've also been messaged to basically change the world, right? And break all these gaps, but nothing's been taken off the plate. And so what's happened is, that internal trauma, that emotional, mental labor, that invisible emotional labor, that's really what's taken a toll. That's why we are in burnout now. We are in burnout and there's a mental health crisis. And I'm just not just women, but all people, families, communities. And there's a crisis today on mental health and burnout. And that's why my next decade and this whole self, this wholeness-based coaching work that I'm doing with individuals and companies is rooted in it's an internal movement. It's helping people master their inner world and vision to what is truly the desired outcome that they want to experience, and what is the trauma that needs to get healed, and what is the again, I think people are like, if there's two streets, most people are chasing and striving on a road that is really a ghost. It's never going to end. Like it's this strive for this identity and this more and this not enough. And I'm trying to get them on a road where they actually have total clarity on what true success, true wholeness means to them, and then help them heal from their patterns and align them with this new paradigm. And so I'm really replacing my next decade of work, and just mark me because I do predict movements. I mean, like, mental health has become really big, but I feel like the next decade is going to be, it's got to be one that's all about wholeness, and that we're redefining success as wholeness, as well-being, but again, really clear on what well-being means. It's not just like more spas and more like green juices and more like, non-GMO, keto, gluten-free diets, right? Like, I mean, the naturopath world has monetized this like as they should, because we've needed to like disrupt traditional healthcare systems. But you can take all the keto and all the, healthiest diet in the world, but if you haven't healed and you haven't done your inner work and your inner paradigm, you're going to continue to chase this never-ending ghost and goal, versus getting in the right line and getting in the right lane. And so the next movement is not an external one; it's an internal one of healing. And you can call it mental health, whatever. I call it wholeness work. And I think businesses are going to need to be built on this. And I think individuals and families are going to need to be built on this. And I think through that, I think wholeness is going to actually solve DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion. Because wholeness and humanity is everybody. Whereas a conservative might think the word diversity means anti-racism, because I live in Florida now and I can see, how people can react to words. And then yet, like something else can trigger a liberal, but if we root all of us in wholeness and internal healing and alignment, then we're actually going to create a better world through that.
Wow. You heard it first here. So as far as next steps in the business space as an extension of internal and external wholeness, what does that look like? What does the future of business look like? Is it still going to be corporate? Because I feel like there's this really huge shift. Again, you're ahead of your time in
Right.
more entrepreneurialism. And I know that when we had first met, you were like, I think you could be this really great, entrepreneur at Audi. And I was, as long as I could be, as long as I could do my job and also talk about the things on a motherhood platform and that could make as much change as I possibly could. But then I realized that I wanted to make more change and felt more comfortable doing it outside of the confines of a corporate box. what are you seeing? What is your
This is a trend that I
vision?
see, and already the people that I'm supporting and that I've been supporting. So I launched, I've been for the last 10 years, I've had over 400 corporate clients, from Fortune companies. And I've brought my S.H.E Summit. I've brought my How We Rise social change, change maker program. I brought my whole life leadership, this wholeness coaching work into corporations. But what was happening was I would hear the pains and the story of like what the Natalie Carpenters at Audi were really going through beneath the surface, but I couldn't get to them, because they're participating in my program through the company. So I'm like, I need to launch a new private coaching advisory and membership, just a private coaching practice where I can give everybody access to my coaching at a more accessible rate, at a more affordable rate. So that is Inner Circle. And so I have both entrepreneurs and also corporates in there. And so this is the trend that I see and how I'm helping people. If you're an entrepreneur, and just take, for example, whether you're starting out or you're somebody who's like super established, and is that most people are trying to do too much. And it's actually the and doing less is actually uncomfortable. They feel like they need to do this and they need to do this and they need to do this and they need to do this. And so what happens is, they lose sight of what the desired outcome is. And so what I do, and you and I have gone through this process, right? Like, what is a desired outcome that you are experiencing, and that, like, so that if this happened 3 months from now, Natalie, with your business, or this happened 1 year from now, like, what does success really mean to you? Like, what does it feel like and what does it look like? And what are you, because I can be like, oh, I want to launch a podcast and I want to launch like da 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 da, and I want to like have this new program and I want to. Okay, so that's like, how much work is that going to be? And so what happens is that people say, like, entrepreneurs will say, like, well, I want to do this, and I'm like, I want to get bigger and I want to blow up and I want to scale and I want to be the next Amy Porterfield and I want to be the next blah blah blah. I want to be the Brene Brown, and so it's just like more and more and more, and then they get lost into again, they're all about the chasing of the more. And so really and then you could net $20 million a year. You can gross 20 million a year, but I want to see what your net is also. Like, I have entrepreneurs that are multi-seven figure entrepreneurial clients, and I've been there myself, but I'm like, and yet, like, when the bank account hits 50K and they have 10 people on staff, they're in anxiety and so it's just like there's a lack of alignment in a lot of areas with entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of them have just been built on over efforting, a struggle. It's exhausting. They're exhausted, and then, not to mention, like, they might be in a family where they're doing majority of the domestic labor, like, and their spouse is not. I mean, there's so much to that. So I help them. I get to know their 360. I want to know their numbers. I want to know everything. And I sort of get them into alignment with truly the desired outcome. So that's what I see it's more simplicity, and it's much more well-being based. Like, you should no longer conform your health and your family to your work, to your business. It's about conforming. It's about defining what your health and well-being looks like for you and conforming your business to that. And get over the ego and get over what culture tells you need to have. That and it's actually, and then the more you align with that, the more you'll actually scale, the more revenues will just come, and then on the corporate side, I mean, that's a whole other one, but basically, I actually see businesses getting really honest at the top. And whether you're a manager of a team or run a department, or whether or not you're at the top, I really see them getting really, really honest with their truth as an organization. And again, it's the same framework. It's like, we can't solve what you can't talk about. So it's really getting them to, again, do the visioning and do the healing. So the vision healing work applies to organizations as well.
So there are no real boundaries as an entrepreneur. And what is your secret weapon to keeping your head on straight?
Ooh, yeah, boundaries. I think, gosh, there's so many tools that I have, but like, give me an example of where you're struggling with boundaries, or where like your community might be struggling, and then I'll sort of
this
coach
isn't
you in
even
this
about
way.
me. Yeah, no, this is actually about, this is my question to you, because you are a successful entrepreneur. You've found wholeness, right? You are developing Inner Circle to support so many other people. And there are no real there's no real sort of parameters or boundaries when you're an entrepreneur. You have to set them yourself. And
Got it.
you seem to have these secret weapons
Yeah.
that you practice to keep your head on straight and to keep you focused. I'd love to know, what does Claudia Chan do?
Yeah, I can give you a few of my tools. So I think at this stage, I think a lot about, I have this acronym called SMART. Um, and the T, really, the last letter is the T, which is time management. And so when I look at, what are the non-negotiables in a given week? And, we have, like, I have a 6 and 8 year old. And so whether it's camp over the summer, which we're in now, or whether it's the school year, you got to get there by 8 or 9 o'clock. Right. And so between, from drop off at 8 or 9 a.m. to the pickup, which is at anywhere from like 3, let's just say 3 or 4 o'clock, then that is my time. That is my time for me, and where I can be present in taking care of myself and my work, my vocation and my platform. And so, and also, doing things that I need to do for the family. But, I said to myself, I like to think a lot about timelines. So when I look at 48, I'm always looking at myself from the outside in perspective. Like if God was looking at me, there's Claudia Chan, or like my dad in heaven is looking at me, right? What does the next 10 years look like for me? And so it's this very constant, I would say, outside in thinking, like distancing myself from myself to look at what is the highest and best use of my time and energy. What deserves my time and my energy? Am I putting it in what matters the most? So I sort of start from this very spiritual place. So I said that's one tool. So Jackson just turned 8. So that basically means he has 10 years until he goes to college, right? So I think of it as like 10 to 12 years, 10 and 11 years between him and Aria, my daughter, where I have what does the next 10 years look like? And really, between rest and I'm getting groceries and the things that I actually like to do pickup and drop off. I'm not outsourcing that to a nanny because I want to be present. I want to be there, even though if I'm a mess or I'm like just picking them up and I'm not in the best mood, I'd still rather do it as much as I can because I just know that these hours and this time is so precious. It's like the moments, right? Where I can build that relationship with them. And so I back into that saying, really, I probably only have 4 or 5 hours a day, Monday through Friday, where I can actually have a clear mind to do my best work. And then I said to myself, how do I life is really short, life is too short to not be doing what I love. Right. And then I looked through yes, I built She Summit conferences and yes, I wrote a book and yes, I did all these things and I was doing all these programs. But that required a lot of corporate calls and business development. That required a lot of speaker engagements. And, I started really kept on simplifying. What do I actually want to do with my time? And so really it's about backing into that T is for the time, time and energy management. And it's and then what do you want to do with your time? And how do you want to use it, right? To, again, live this meaningful life. And I was like, if you pare down everything, I love one-on-one with people. I love getting to know you quickly and deeply and support. And if you have me for an hour, if you have me for 3 hours, I want to leave you not the same. I want to give you as much as I can give you. So that, because why not? I want to give you everything I could possibly give you so you can get to a better place. Because I'm impacting a person's life, that is, what is more meaningful than that? So really Inner Circle came about because I was I want to have a therapy office. I want to spend time with one-on-one. And it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of blah, 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 or you're the waitress at the diner, how many lives. And that's how I want to spend my next 10 years. And now everything is really designed around that. And I also what else do I love? I love, you should follow me on Instagram. I love recording, I think preaching and becoming a pastor one day is probably in the timeline, and so, I'm really preaching, Instagram sort of my church. And so it's what are the things that you love? So you're really backing into your time. So the SMART stands for, the S is really for serving. and like solo engagement. That's the S. So you could call it sales, you could call it business development, but it's like my one-on-one time. If I'm sending you a voice memo, I'm like, so that's the S. The M is really for, you could call it marketing or ministry. It's like spreading, that's like the social media, that's the newsletters, like that's, and again, less is more. You don't need to do everything. You have to do what works for you. You have to work for your personality type. Like if you're a high creative or you're a very organized person, like different things are going to work for you. So like you love the podcast, right? Like this, and then it's like, what else can you remove and continue to lean in on what you love doing most of and building a business around that, backing into that. The A is for art, like when I'm doing my passion artwork, which could be, writing a message, or it could be, it's just my creative time. And then the R is for running operations. That's the paying of the bills. And that is the sort of, like the thing that talking to the lawyer, and having to like, hire a new person or have a management meeting. Like that's the R for running operations. So that's smart working. And because I am so creative and I don't like asanas and like big systems, I have to it's like CBT. Like I'm like, okay, today is like an S day. Today is like, I'm like constantly in the smart way of working.
And what was T?
Time management. So time and energy management. You're always like, again, and in a way, the T is really like, you almost have to start with the T because you have to it's always about backing into what matters the most, and it's like really my coaching work, whether I'm helping you with your business or I'm helping you with burnout, whatever it is, it's really about backing into what matters the most. And most people work in the reverse. Most people are like, oh, I want to create something. And then they just do everything. And it's, and it's a lot of muscling and there's a lot of burnout.
Yes, I can relate. And I'm so grateful for you, for our friendship, and that you get me and that you get others, and that you truly are of service and you have helped so many and not just me. And I know that that is your passion. And I can't wait for you to have some sort of a pulpit to, preach from, in addition to Instagram, because I think you're amazing at it. And it's so authentic and real. And I just love and appreciate you so much. So thank you very much for being here with me today and sharing a little bit of you with listeners, because now everyone else can understand why I love you so much. I mean, everybody already knows how incredible you are, but I just am super grateful to know you and to have you on my team. So, so to speak, in the friendship world sense. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful for our friendship. And that's why I called it Inner Circle, because we can't do this alone. It's like we're all energetically tied to each other, spiritually. And I think that we're all like lifting and supporting each other. It's like building on each other's lists and holding space for each other. And together, I used to always say, together we will rise. Together we're going to get whole together, and we become healed healers. And that's really what we're doing. We're helping to heal others. And by you doing the all over again, like what would you do all over again, and creating space for such vulnerable, transparent conversations, like that's what you've always been best at too. I mean, you are so generous with your IVF story. You were like so generous with that and creating, space for that. Again, one of the first movers there. And, this is sort of like that next version of that. And because it's really, again, it's about the deeper trauma. It's about the deeper stuff that we're all going through. And so I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And I've got to find out, is your book on Audible? Because it's been a while since I read it, but I like listening to Audible now. So I'm going to re-listen. For anyone who is listening, please check out Claudia's book, This Is How We Rise. It's amazing.
You can follow me if you want a free coaching message from me, a personalized message from me. You could actually just DM me on Instagram, your email address. It's at Claudia Chan Wagner. You'll find me quickly. Just DM me your email address, and I will send you a free resource. And then also you can just check me out at claudiachan.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claudia, for being here today.
Thank you.
I know we'll be speaking so soon.